Hello everyone, this is RaySpace and welcome back to Realism Overhaul Sandbox in Kerbal Space Program 1.12. I'm here to introduce a longship design that uses a unique ion engine configuration. Actually, it's technically a, pulsed inductive thruster. We'll get to that. The fact that it's a pulsed inductive thruster is not actually the interesting thing about it. But a longship is one where the whole thing spins around in order to generate artificial gravity. So it spins around this point. And, you know, some other ships have arms and they try and rotate like this. Sorry, I can't show it properly, but this rotates on its long axis. And so the crew would be standing, this would be the floor in that case. So this is the bottom of it, and then there's another floor here, and so forth. Actually, we can see the interior because there's a pass-through interior, and the Kerbals can sort of float around inside, but that's separate. So it generates artificial gravity like that, and that's why it's called a longship, because in order to do that, you have to have a distance from the center of mass, and the amount of distance you have will determine how much artificial gravity you get. If you want Earth gravity, you probably need more than this. We're just trying to make, let's say, somewhere between Moon and Mars gravity, and then you can spin this probably 2 to 3 times per minute and it'll be alright. Anything more than 2 to 3 times per minute and you're probably going to make your crew a little bit queasy. 6 rotations per minute is generally considered the limit. So anyway, that is what a longship is. And of course, if you're going to have the habitat on one side like this, you need something to counterbalance the habitat on the opposite side. Otherwise, the center of mass will be very close to the habitat and you're not going to get any benefit from it. So, in this case, we have the reactor on this side, but even the reactor wouldn't be that heavy compared to the HAB, because in this case, we don't have a very powerful nuclear thermal propulsion system. We're mainly relying on an ion engine, or, an electric engine, which is a pulsed inductive thruster, okay? So, in this case, I'm just using the nozzles from KSP Interstellar because that allowed it to gauge properly the thrust that we would get from our reactor. So the reactor is sized to what we need for our main electric system. And so this is a very small NTR. It's about 24 megawatts. Normal nuclear thermal rockets are in the gigawatt range. Like Nerva, that's a gigawatt rocket. We're only in the megawatt range. 24 megawatts is what we're looking for here. And so it's not that heavy over here. As a result, we can't counterbalance the HAB very well if we just have the reactor and generator. So I have a tank of water. So the idea here is that we're going to carry the water. It'll provide some protection from radiation in this case. And we are going to convert that water into hydrogen and oxygen for our propellant. So then we don't have to worry about boil off along the way. The hydrogen and oxygen is going to be stored as water, and then when we need it, we're going to convert it to hydrogen and oxygen. Now we carry some hydrogen already for the way out, and that's because even with all the hydrogen here, it's really more oxygen than hydrogen that we end up getting. So we don't end up getting that much hydrogen, and this is the oxygen tanks, which are empty. So I'm going to start the conversion. Now, I've had some problem with my... and I have to unlock some tanks here. Oh, no, it's generating. Okay. I have to make sure that the vessel mass remains balanced when this conversion happens. So, let's see. I originally had the water splitting into gaseous hydrogen and gaseous oxygen and then being converted to liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And for some reason that led to a net mass increase, even though I think I got all the math right. So that was troubling. We do not want a net mass increase out of nowhere. Here it seems like we have a net mass decrease, but it could also be boil off. But we don't want any boil off. So, well, it could also be them consuming stuff. But at least it's not increasing, which would violate the laws of physics, which we don't want to do. So, that's a positive. Alright, so the other problem we have is that we would really like the electrical system to work properly. So what's unique about this? Well, first of all, pulsed inductive thruster is a different kind of electric engine that doesn't have the same drawbacks of ion engines when it comes to using liquid oxygen, which is what I intend to use. So JM Studios introduced me to this, and I looked it up on Wikipedia. Sorry. So it has some benefits when using liquid oxygen or water. We could use water directly. And it has better efficiency with those propellants than ion or Hall thruster would have with those propellants. There we go. But an ion or Hall thruster would have pretty good, basically the same kind of specific impulse with xenon or argon or stuff like that. So we are getting 3,240 seconds of ISP with oxygen. And it sort of scales differently than the ion engines. It seems like as long as you just need, if you put more power into it, you don't need to upscale it. It just increases the rate at which it pulses out. It's a pulsed inductive thruster because it basically pulses the propellant out. As long as you increase the energy, you just increase the pulse rate. So you don't need to upscale the engine. And that seemed like a good idea because I don't want a heavy engine, right? And we're trying to shove 24 megawatts through it. It's a 24 megawatt system. So I figured that probably the ion/Hall thruster version would be big in that case, and this is not so big. But we've spent orbit trying to generate the liquid oxygen here, and we've only got 38 meters per second. Now, it says 0 stage time, but I don't believe that. I think it doesn't know how much thrust this makes. So, we have to verify that it makes thrust and that it can do so in time warp. So that's a thing. Now, that's the pulse inductive thruster aspect of it. That's why it's a little bit peculiar, and I'll have to leave you to read up the details of how this kind of thing works. I don't have the slides prepared to try and explain this. And I was just introduced to it myself anyway. So it's sort of like, the flight attendant saying welcome to Los Angeles when she just arrived. Anyway, the actual interesting thing about this particular setup is that I have the thrusters on a slider. And this is because it occurred to me that if we are going to have the water on one side and the water is going to deplete over time, then the center of mass is slowly going to move towards the hab. And of course, that means we get less artificial gravity along the way after we use all the propellant. But in order to adjust for this, it's important that the ion engines can actually point through the center of mass. And so what we have is the ion engines actually do move in order to point through the center mass properly. There's also a trivial amount of gimbling to help out. Not only that, in order to make it so that we can adjust our orbit without stopping the spin, the thrusters can actually rotate to the opposite side. So they can go there. And I just used a deploy limit in order to make that happen. So that's the interesting thing about this. I'm pretty sure, I mean, you can do this with robotics, of course, but I'm pretty sure nobody's seen a part like this. I don't even know if somebody's done this with robotics. So, anyway, it says 1.446 kilonewtons, and that's one thing about the pulsed inductive thrusters. I mean, of course, we've got 24 megawatts going through this. If you use 24 megawatts with the ion engines or Hall thrusters, if you had enough Hall thrusters or ion engines in order to use 24 megawatts, that'd be pretty heavy probably, then you would probably get more thrust than this actually. That's a lot of power. But we do have a nuclear reactor. So we're getting actually less thrust than we probably would with those systems, but those systems would have erosion when it comes to liquid oxygen or some bad effect, and they would get less ISP. They would get about 2,200 instead of this. So that's the trade-off. Alright, now it is affecting our orbit. I'll turn this off and turn off the RCS, otherwise we won't be able to see whether it's operating properly. So our apoapsis is going up, time warp, and it's still going up at a faster rate. So all is well with this system. Except we're drifting away from prograde. I wonder if this version of... This isn't persistent thrust, this is the KSP Interstellar version of persistent thrust, the one that's bundled into KSP Interstellar. I think we have too much radiator. Probably. But we very much don't want boil off. But we do have that 24 megawatts, and it says each of these is radiating like 400 kilowatts, but I think they have more capacity than that. It depends on what kind of part temperatures we want to allow. It's not getting to prograde very well, is it? Maybe spin stabilizing is the best way, but probably close to the Earth, I wouldn't want to use the ion engine to cycle out like that, because it really can't hold prograde very well. Spinning this is going to be a complicated business. Anyway, so that's the idea. First, we use the water to sort of shield the radiation from the reactor. The reactor is not actually that big, it's not like an NTR reactor. And the reason why nuclear thermal rocket engines like NERVA are normally not bimodal, which means that they don't normally provide electric power as well as provide thrust, is because if you're providing the electric power from the reactor, you have to keep it on, and if you have to keep it on, you need to keep it cooled, and if you need to keep it cooled, those NTR reactors like on NERVA are gigawatt reactors, so they need way more radiators than we've got even here. We've got a really small reactor compared to the one on NERVA, and so we have this radiator array. So, but anyway, we are shielding it with the water, then we convert the water to the hydrogen and oxygen, and then use the oxygen for the ion engine, but the hydrogen for the thermal rocket nozzle, though we could change it so that this uses hydrogen as well. It just would get way less thrust, though way more efficiency. There are other fancy features to this. This part here, the cabin, actually has an IVA. It's my normal IVA for my space plane, so it doesn't quite fit the windows exactly, but it sort of fits, and so we can see outside, and we have the raster prop monitor stuff in here. And somewhat floaty Kerbals because the seats are configured for humans. So that's a normal IVA view. But if we EVA, Patfree here has EVA'd inside this, because it's only this metallic portion that has the regular IVA. The rest is pass-through, which means it's basically a part with colliders. And unlike free IVA, which is another way you can have the same sort of effect, the Kerbals can pick stuff up or put stuff down inside this IVA. So they could redecorate this. They can interact with stuff. They have a mattress at the bottom just in case they have gravity, but they also have the bags just in case they don't. Okay, open back door. Generally, you wouldn't want to do this with this bit. This door would actually just connect to a different level. That's just to connect to a different level. It's not an airlock kind of thing. So we wouldn't want to vent the entire habitat. But yeah, they can just float directly outside like this, you see. Close back door. I actually made sure that the volume of the supplies was exactly correct, and I placed them physically. So we see the care packages at the top there. Oh, the hatches have colliders. Everything has colliders. Otherwise the Kerbals would accidentally clip into things. So it's a fairly spacious habitat, as you can see. And actually, this bit up here is the airlock section. Open airlock. So that closes, and then that opens. And then the Kerbals can go out. But in this case, he's not going out. Because instead of this being airlock to the outside... Well, actually, I think there's a hatch there. I made that hatch open. But this is actually this tube. This. And so the Kerbals can actually go all the way down to the reactor. But... okay, I don't want to do that right now. Pack. These are the nubs for the radiators right now. Close airlock, close that side first, then open this side. Right. And then let's get back into the cockpit. Okay, grab board. Of course, it looks much more spacious for the Kerbals because the Kerbals are small. So that's what that area is. And actually, this cabin has the capability to eject out in case. That probably wouldn't be a good thing to do except in flight. It was meant to fit Starship. This whole front end, the way it's shaped, is actually so that it can fit inside Starship, and this would be an escape pod for Starship. So, yeah. It's all very particularly designed, but it's serving this purpose right now. So that's this longship, and its unique sort of situation with the ion thruster being able to point through the center of mass like this. With the ion thruster thrust, of course, it's not that important. It's just, in principle, we don't want to run the RCS thruster to constantly hold balance all the way through the many days that it would be running. So I figured this would be a good idea. And I think our replenishment rate on the liquid oxygen is faster than the ion engine uses it. So that's probably good too. So we can convert the water along the way. The problem is that the hydrogen, I don't know how well that's going to hold with the boil off. Right now it's replenishing just fine and doesn't seem to be boiling off too quickly. So what would happen with this is actually the NTR would boost us up first and then get us on escape. I don't think it has enough delta V to do that. Probably this would be assembled in high orbit, and then the NTR would get us onto escape, and then the ion engine would do the rest. It would get us to our destination, it would capture around the destination, and then bring us back. Hopefully we would do some ISRU at the destination in order to replenish our water and then break it apart into hydrogen and oxygen. That's the idea. So anyway, that's this longship. I don't have a name for it. The main thing was introducing this unique little pulsed inductive thruster and the fact that it can shift like that along the center of mass. I don't know if that's useful for anybody, but I had this problem where this water would deplete and center mass would shift up, so I decided to solve the problem. There we go. So that's the solution. And by the way, if you don't know how to bring up the red dot for the center of mass, that's attitude adjustment in MechJeb. It's just this display the COM, so you can display it like that. Alright, oh, and I built a controller in here, so we are controlling from this part so that we don't have to control from some weird location. Alright, so anyway, there it is. With that, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.